welcome to the channel. This is Osmose by Expressive, a synthesizer created in partnership with Haken Audio that by now you have probably seen thousands of videos due to its innovative capabilities. But what I wanted to add, it's a few details on how to play this new instrument that I think are not really captured in the videos I've been watching around this machine. I wanted to divide this video roughly into 4 parts, starting by discussing a little bit of those experience details onto how the synth presets were designed for the experience of the keyboard playing. On the second part, I wanted to show you my selection from the 500 existing presets in this machine. And then I want to do some experimentation with the other equipment in the studio that are compatible with MPE, because this is the first device I have that can actually output all the different values of MIDI Polyphonic Expression. I want to test out of the box how will the Osmose control my OB6 and the ASM Hydrasynth, for which I am particularly excited to create sound designs for MPE. But without further ado, let's have a look into this machine first. What you probably have seen already out there, it's how people create those vibrato pitch bends by wiggling a note sideways on the Osmose E, and this is for sure one of the affordances that this instrument can provide. But at least for me, it's more than this. I mean, what you will first notice when you watch the introduction of this video is that I barely move my hands to play this instrument, and that's because just by barely touching it, you start producing sounds already. It's not only about velocity that you normally have on synthesizers, meaning that the fastest you play a note, the louder the volume will be, but in here, it's also about how much you press each of the keys. The key bed is quite sensitive. And this doesn't mean that this keyboard don't support velocity. It does, but there is a continuum measurement of the travel course of each key, which is also connected to how they design each of their patches to produce sound. So you see the minimal pressure in the key influences how loud my sound will be. So it's not a mere relation of an envelope and maybe the modulation of the VCA by velocity. Talking a little bit about specifications before we continue on the experience for this key bed. This is a very powerful synth engine by Haken Audio called Eaganmatrix. And the little I know so far about how to start designing sound for this instrument, it feels almost like you have to belong to a secret society to understand how to sound design for this machine. And that's because the man behind this sound engine, Edmund Egan, and the technology by Haken Audio have packed a lot of power and a lot of modulation possibilities onto the synth engine. For you to have a picture, this machine contains 5 oscillators plus noise, 5 filters that are multi-mode that can be configured as low pass, high pass, band pass, low shelf, high shelf, notch, and all pass in many different pulse configuration, plus 2 biquad filters that can be used as granular synthesis modules. You can create modulations to emulate vowels and mouth shapes, as well as regular additive synthesis. And instead of using envelopes and LFOs, what the synthesizer has is 5 independent shape generators that can be used as regular LFOs or envelopes. But it seems that programming sounds for this machine is really an advanced task. But back to the experience, the other detail here is regarding aftertouch in itself. It is not only about the travel course of the key, it is also the capability of mapping an exact position of the key to create a very special experience between the sound engine and the keypad capabilities. So if you notice here, just as in a clavichord, I have to travel a certain distance with a key in order for the pick to reach the string, and once I pass that point, that's when the pluck occurs. Yes, it is velocity sensitive, so if I play faster, it will be louder. However, the aftertouch in this keypad has a unique feeling, because normally what you will do in a regular synthesizer, you press the key until the end of its course and hit a hard surface, and that's when you start doing your aftertouch. However, in this device, the aftertouch feels much more like a travel space. You see, there is a good distance here between when I reach aftertouch and get to really the end of the travel of the key. And that's where the magic happens, because if you look at the sound design here, after the pluck, if I continue traveling and pressing the key here, the effect I get, it is a pitch bend effect, which will be exactly what you feel in a clavichord when you force the hammer against the strings. So it's not only about aftertouch or how sensitive the keyboard is, or the fact that you can do pitch bends when you wiggle the keys sideways, but it's also this attention to details on how it feels on the keyboard and how the sound reacts to it. And this device really excels on emulating strings, metallic sounds, and also flutes. And that is why everybody tries to describe how peculiar it is to play with this device and how it feels. And last but not least, I want to talk to you about affordances. Affordances are these possibilities of use that you get from a specific design. And in this case, it's not only about the fact that the keys can travel sideways, and this can be mapped in the majority of cases to pitch bend, but it's also about learning how to play with these new possibilities, right? These new degrees of freedom. And the first thing you will notice is that since, of course, you have the familiar piano keypad here, what ends up happening is that for the black keys, since they are located higher up, it's much easier to bend them sideways than within the white keys. So even without intention, you might pitch bend the notes just because of the fact that black keys have a height here. So you can bounce against them. And that is not that easy when you are trying to wiggle the white keys, unless you have pressed the key all the way down to aftertouch. But in the case of this patch, for instance, it creates a redundancy, because in aftertouch I also have pitch bend to simulate the feeling of playing a real clavichord, right? What I have noticed while playing around with the affordances here is that even when you press just a little, you might get a grip in the corner of the keys here to actually wiggle, because here you have a good grip to have a very controlled pitch bend. And of course, this device has other familiar affordances like mod wheel on a synth, and pitch bend. However, when you use the pitch bend here, you are pitching every note that is being pressed, and what MPE is all about is to have this pitch bend information per note you press. This patch is not a good example because this is a monophonic patch. I mean, not completely, and let me explain, because it's not only about pitch bends with the wiggling of the keys, but you also have this special glide that is configurable between the intervals of keys. So in the case of this patch, if I am triggering several octaves of distance between the notes I'm pressing, the patch sounds really polyphonic, but when I am pressing keys on a smaller interval, I think of a fifth here, you will notice that I'm actually causing a pitch bend, and this is actually a legato between the two notes. And in order to complete the whole glide, you have to press the first note, start pressing the second note to cause the pitch bend, and then release the first note to finally reach the final note you were pressing, the second note you were pressing. And this also creates several microtonal possibilities for you once you master how to play with those legatos. You can see that aftertouch is this strong blow. So now let me show you a feel of those presets that I think that really captures the essence of this instrument, the best of the worlds, both of what the sound engine can do in terms of timbre, but also how can you best take advantage of the new degrees of freedom that this keybed provides you. Like in this patch that I showed you just now, one of my favorites, Yokobué. And the other timbre for which this sound engine excels is on strings. I mean, strings is one of the hardest sounds to synthesize, and the fact that you can emulate with physical modeling the sound of a bow into a vibrating string is simply amazing. And of course, the fact that you can both use the glide function and also the wiggling of the keys to simulate the real instrument vibrato, it really adds to this sensation of a fretless instrument played with a bow. And I mean the same here with a slap bass, right? You can still make use of the glides, but it is velocity sensitive in relation to how you slap the bass. And you have this scratch metal texture in the aftertouch, which really gives you that sensation that you are pressing harder into metal strings. And all of these patches are quite musical, quite useful in a music composition, but you also have ambience or sound effects, which are always peculiar, but specifically this one conveys so much about the feeling of playing these keys. it really feels, you can really feel the texture of this wet surface that stick into your fingers. And if you pay attention here, they are modulating the pitch of the sound, but there is a lot of these release sounds that I believe are mapped to the direction that the key is going up and down, since in MPE you can actually map the continuous coordinates of the key angles here. Then of course you can use this to create release sound for electric pianos or hammers. But I hope that you can feel a little bit how it feels to play on this keyboard, because it is really like sticking your fingers into the texture. And the ones designing for this keyboard, designing the sounds for this keyboard, they really paid attention to where the aftertouch starts and how will it feel with a real instrument. So you can understand why they are so precious about sound designing for this engine here. Another timbre that physical modulation excels is onto percussive sounds. Even more if we're talking about this marimba or metallic sound. Of course, this engine is totally capable of doing regular subtractive synthesis sounds, but I think it is really on making use of all the coordinates that this keyboard can pass through MPE and making use of all the different possibilities that the synth engine can do. And for me, this is one of the best patches to convey all the power of the synth engine. It's called Walking Elephant, which I used for the introduction of this video. So you have a clicking every time you engage with the key, and depending on which pitch you are, you get this clicking sound. A more flute sound starts when you go down in pressure. And then at the end of the course, you get the string sound. In aftertouch, you got a vibrato in pitch. This sound is really beautiful. And you can see how it cranks. On release, depending on the pitch, you get a metallic sound. You hear? So it is really like a sound design universe. Not only think about timbres, but also how you interact with the sound. And that is the part that I think is really unique of this instrument, because a lot of care was taken into designing sounds for the experience of playing in this keypad. So it's not only about the specs or the fact that you have a new degree of freedom here, or it is really like meticulous details of a high-end instrument. A lot of care and love that was put into crafting this instrument. not to say the technical and technological capabilities, right? But okay, now I'm super anxious to actually try to plug and play the MIDI output of this key into my instruments that are MPE capable. This video is probably getting too long already, so my intent is not to do any sound design. I just wanted to show you out of the box what will happen when I plug the MIDI cable out of the Osmose into my two MPE capable synthesizers, starting with the OB6. So let's try this out. Okay, the good news is that connecting Osmose to the OB6 was pretty straightforward. All I had to do was to reach for the global parameters in the OB6 and then click here on the MIDI channel, and this is where you use the selector buttons to choose which MIDI channels are you using. And the last option in this menu, if you are above firmware version 1.6, is actually MPE, and this is how you turn the OB6 to MPE mode. Then it's just to click twice here to get out of the global settings. Then in the Osmose side, it was in a way fairly straightforward thanks to the good user interface they have here. So I just have to access menu, and then you see the option here on MIDI exit, and here you can see that by default my MIDI output was already set to MPE. And then I went to output menu, and this is where I started to understand how this keyboard would interface with my MPE compatible synthesizers. Here you see that the parameters I'm passing is pressure, which means how far I press my keys in the Osmose. And down here you can set what will be the output for the synthesizer that is being controlled by the Osmose. So in this case I can set it to the channel pressure, which is a default on MPE, but I can also, for instance, set my Osmose pressure to affect the polyphonic aftertouch in the OB6. And this is where I realized that it would be tricky to try to get the best out of MPE on a subtractive synthesizer architecture, because if you look here, for instance, into the aftertouch, you will see that what I'm doing is actually I'm routing the aftertouch in the Osmose to affect the channel 74 in the OB6. And a little bit by try and error here, I wasn't reading my manuals as I should, but what I realized is that this channel that is now assigned to my aftertouch in the Osmose is actually my filter cutoff frequency in the OB6, meaning that if you want to route any of your MPE parameters into your subtractive synthesis MPE compatible synthesizer, you need to know your MIDI channels and what you are controlling. This will be the way to assign the values from the Osmose, like for instance pressure, aftertouch, or the wiggle of the keys, to different MIDI channels. That's how you would configure the Osmose as a MIDI controller. I mean, this is far from being a full tutorial on MPE. I just wanted to show you my first impressions, but another issue that I've encountered when I tried to connect the Osmose to the OB6 was that when I was playing the black keys, it was not mapping to the pitch in my OB6. And the way I solved this was to change here on the mode menu my MPE channel mapping from 1 to 6. I haven't looked into the manual, but intuitively I thought that if the OB6 has 6 voices and each of the MPE voice is mapped to one MIDI channel, my guess was that I should set the range here up to 6. And at least for the OB6 this worked perfectly. Now I have all the keys mapped following the pitch. But okay, how does this sound? Is it any good? Do I get any benefit on using the OB6 on MPE? Well, I must confess that without properly mapping all the degrees of freedom in MPE carefully, the gains in expression are very low. Of course, I have here my aftertouch. and is polyphonic aftertouch, and this is a feature that the OB6 keypad already gives me. In total honesty, yes, the Osmose keypad feels really good, and it was kind of hard to go back to the OB6 keys. They kind of felt stiff after you play for a while in the Osmose, but don't take me wrong, the keypad in the OB6 is a very premium feeling, but after playing in the Osmose for a while, you kind of get used to the sensitivity, to how soft the keys are, but without really designing a patch to make use of all the variables that this keypad is sending via MIDI to the other synthesizer. It's more a matter of comfort, and yes, of course, I have easy access to the sensitivity parameters here in the Osmose, which gives me much more control on the curves of aftertouch and press and so on. That is not so straightforward in the OB6, but I think to really take advantage of MPE in the other synthesizer, you have to design your patch and map your MIDI channels to exactly the parameters you want to control, to then be able to get the best of all worlds. Like for instance, when I had a patch that I like a lot in the OB6, and I could use aftertouch to move the cutoff frequency up and down. This is an interesting, very interesting use, because in the OB6 I will have to manually do the knobbing of that filter cutoff frequency, but it's not an off-the-shelf experience in as much as the Osmose native library that is designed to make the most use of all the variables in MPE. But one synthesizer that I'm actually particularly interested on trying out is the ASM Hydrasynth, because for the little I know, the parameters coming from MPE are actually accessible to be routed into the Hydrasynth mod matrix. So instead of going through manuals to learn which MIDI channel you can send your MPE parameters, you can actually route the same parameters to modulate different variables in the Hydrasynth. So let me try that out. Okay, in the Hydra, it couldn't have been more straightforward. I tried to get a native patch, one of my favorites, Blade Titles PS, classic Blade Runner sound. I knew from googling a little bit here and there that I had to go to system setup to configure or enable MPE. But when I started to scroll after the MIDI settings here, already in the 4th page, I started to see like MPE lock, MPE lock. So I came to realize that here on the 5th or 6th page, MPE was already on, and as soon as I plugged in the MIDI cable, MPE already took over several parameters, including the ribbon and other controllers in the Hydrasynth. So it was literally plug and play, and I want to show you the experience of playing Blade Titles from the Osmose. But before that, let me just check something. If I go to an empty patch here, just to not mess up with any of the existing ones, and then if I go here to the mod matrix and try to assign something, let's just say here to my filter 1 cutoff frequency, theoretically, here it is. I can now find MPE variables such as MPE X, MPE Y absolute, Y relative, as well, and of course any MIDI channel that I want to use to modulate the cutoff frequency. But you can see here direct access to the MPE variables, and that's what is exciting for me, because you can essentially use the mod matrix to assign MPE values to modulate basically any of your mod matrix parameters, meaning that you can actually create very clever use of the MPE parameters to modulate your sound, to give expression to your sound, and that's what's exciting for me. So stay tuned in the channel for more explorations with Hydrasynth and MPE, because now I'm very excited to start creating patches for Hydra to be controlled by Osmose. But let me show you how it is to play the native patches from Osmose. So here we go, playing Blade Titles in Osmose. So here it is. Off the shelf, playing Blade Titles, native patch in Hydrasynth from MPE. I mean, it's plug and play, cannot be easier than that. It is a completely different experience from playing in the native keypad, because you get only this high volume when you really reach aftertouch on the Hydrasynth keypad. Whereas here in the Osmose, it's just to get to the end of the chorus of the key before aftertouch, and you get this really distorted brass sound. Each band is there. So even without configuring the patch, Hydrasynth was very much MPE ready, even in these native patches. But what I'm really excited about is to try out, since Hydra has this capability of mapping directly to MPE X and Y axis, it would be exciting to try creating patches where you can modulate these parameters in pro of sound design, much like the native patches in the Osmose that takes the most advantage of MPE. But it was so easy, it was plug and play. Of course, if you want to run your Hydrasynth in MPE, you don't need an Osmose as a controller. Now there are many MPE controllers available out there, but just the fact that the synths I already have had that capability, and now with having a synthesizer or a keypad that is MPE capable, opens up a whole new window in the studio for sound design. I'm really excited with this machine, both because of its native sound engine, which will be another universe to dive in terms of sound design, but also what can I do with this device to control the synthesizers are already on, to take the most advantage of MPE with the lessons I learned from the sound design of these native patches on the Osmose. That's amazing, guys. I hope this video was interesting for you. Thank you guys for all subscribers, for all the comments. Stay tuned for upcoming videos on MPE in Hydrasynth and OB6. I'm also excited to test this one with, for instance, the Model D. So let me know in the comments if you have interest in this topic. And as always, thanks for watching.